October 1993, central Kenya. Wildlife veterinarians slid back the steel bolts on a row of transport crates, releasing 20 eastern black rhinos into the red dust of the Laikipia basin. The surrounding valley was ecologically paralyzed, silenced by decades of relentless cattle ranching and the brutal poaching wars of the 1980s. Open savannas were choked out, overgrown, and dying from the roots up. That single release was not just a desperate attempt to save a vanishing species, it launched the most violent landscaping project in natural history. To understand how a small group of wild animals engineered a biological miracle, look first at the invisible catastrophe that destroyed this land. We suffer from a dangerous psychological blind spot, the shifting baseline syndrome. Tourists travel to the African savanna, look at an endless horizon of dense scrubland, and assume it is natural. This solid green wall of impenetrable brush feels wild. It is not. That dense foliage is the thick scar tissue of a broken ecosystem. Without the black rhino, the Laikipia basin suffered from a terminal ecological condition called severe woody encroachment. For thousands of years, the landscape maintained a delicate balance. Wide-open grazing lawns stretched for miles. These vast green oceans of grass were broken up only by small scattered patches of trees and bushes. This open space was critical for survival. It allowed raw sunlight to bake the deep soil. That harsh solar energy drove the massive seasonal grass blooms that fed hundreds of thousands of smaller grazing animals. Entire species of impala, wildebeest, and zebra relied on those wide-open corridors. Clear sight lines were necessary to eat safely and spot stalking predators from a distance. Then, the brutal poaching wars of the 1970s and 1980s wiped the black rhino off the map. Poachers hunted the animals for their horns until nothing remained but blood in the dirt. When the giant rhinos vanished, the woody brush took over. Fast-growing acacia trees and fibrous bushes exploded across the plains like a virus. Nothing was left to eat them back. In just a few short decades, the open grazing lawns vanished under a suffocating canopy of thorns. This caused a massive, silent ecological collapse. Smaller grazing animals possess highly specialized digestive systems. An impala or a zebra cannot process woody branches. Soft green grass is required to survive. As the encroaching brush closed in and killed the grass, smaller grazers faced a brutal, binary choice: starve to death or abandon the territory. Most left. And when the massive herds of grazers departed, the apex predators followed. Lions, leopards, and cheetahs simply packed up and moved out to find food. The land looked green to the untrained human eye, but it functioned as a biological desert. Dense thickets physically blocked sunlight from hitting the soil. The ground went cold and sterile. Local human communities who relied on healthy grasslands for their cattle herds watched their livelihoods dry up and blow away. The food web broke down simply because a single massive piece of the machine was missing. The soil lost its natural nutrient cycling. Seasonal rain ran off the hard-packed earth instead of soaking in. The valley was suffocating under a thick blanket of unmanaged, hostile vegetation. People looked at the dense green walls of thorn bushes and thought nature was thriving. Observers had no idea they were staring at a massive graveyard. The ecosystem was locked in a death spiral. Human intervention using machetes, tractors, and controlled burns was far too slow. Fixing a vast area spanning nearly 400,000 acres proved far too expensive. The Conservancy needed a massive machine capable of operating constantly, around the clock, without fuel or pay. A biological bulldozer was required to break the land open again. And then the math changed. In the early 1990s, a dedicated group of conservationists and anti-poaching managers at the Ol Pejeta Conservancy looked at this suffocating ecological graveyard. Human technology could not fix it. You cannot send enough men with machetes and chainsaws to manually clear hundreds of thousands of acres of dense hostile thorn bushes. The sheer volume of labor required would permanently bankrupt the Conservancy. A different biological solution was necessary. The landscape needed a machine specifically engineered over millions of years to rip forests apart. They needed the eastern black rhinoceros. To understand exactly how this animal functions, look closely at its face. A white rhino is essentially a biological lawnmower, possessing a wide, flat, square lip designed to crop short grass tight to the ground. A white rhino trapped in a dense thicket of woody brush is useless. It will stand there and starve. But the black rhino is built differently. It is a highly specialized 3,000-pound pruning machine. Its distinct prehensile hooked upper lip functions exactly like a heavy muscular finger. A black rhino does not graze, it browses, and it browses violently. Wrapping that prehensile lip around the fibrous branches of acacia trees, the rhino simply rips them right off the trunk. These animals effortlessly snap branches as thick as a human arm, crushing heavy thorns that would destroy the soft digestive tracts of other grazing animals. Massive physical bodies smash right through the densest, most impenetrable thickets on the savanna. As the heavy armor of the animal kingdom, black rhinos just step in, eat the overgrowth, and let nature take over. By physically tearing the tight canopy open, these mammals create massive, gaping holes in the thick brush. For the first time in decades, raw sunlight pours through those open holes and hits the cold, sterile soil. The Old Pajeda management team knew that dropping a starter population of black rhinos into the dying valley would trigger immediate action. The animals would not need diesel fuel or a daily paycheck. Waking up and eating was the only requirement. Wildlife managers gambled everything on those initial 20 rhinos. It was a high-risk operation. Darting and moving wild animals that large and inherently aggressive is a logistical nightmare, requiring heavy lifting equipment, specialized drugs, and nerves of steel. Moving a sleeping giant is dangerous work. But the team pulled it off. Angry rhinos walked out of their steel crates and immediately started destroying the brush. Ripping, snapping, and crushing, the animals slowly began to clear the choking canopy. Wide, jagged paths were cut straight through the worst of the dense scrubland. What happened next defied every biological model. You might hear that story and think a tiny group of 20 rhinos could not possibly reshape a landscape this overgrown. It sounds like an optimistic exaggeration or a feel-good conservation myth, but clinical data proves exactly how rapidly a dead ecosystem can rebound when its missing biological engine is reintroduced. According to the official Kenya National Wildlife Census, that small foundation of 20 animals did not just survive in the harsh scrub. The herd thrived, breeding at an explosive, unprecedented rate. Today, that original group has multiplied to over 165 individuals, forming the largest single continuous population of eastern black rhinos in all of East Africa. As localized numbers exploded, this violent landscaping project scaled up massively across the entire valley. The ecological cascade effect was immediate. When massive feeding rhinos ripped open the dense thickets and let harsh sunlight finally hit the ground, dormant grass seeds woke up. Seeds buried deep in the dark, cold soil for decades sprouted. Famous wide-open grazing lawns began to rapidly return. When the green grass returned, massive animal herds came back. Thousands of impala, zebra, and wildebeest flooded into the valley to graze on fresh lawns. These grazers could finally see across the open spaces, easily spotting predators creeping through the grass. But the rhinos provided much more than just sunlight and visual safety. A single adult black rhino produces roughly 50 pounds of dung every single day. Because these animals are highly territorial, waste is not scattered randomly. It is deposited in massive communal piles called middens. These middens acted as highly concentrated, localized fertilizer bombs dropped directly onto the newly opened soil, triggering a secondary biological explosion. Massive swarms of dung beetles immediately arrived by the thousands to break down the heavy waste, burying nutrients deep into the earth. Insectivorous birds flocked to the area in massive clouds to feed on the endless supply of beetles. The basic physical structure of the soil changed, becoming rich, porous, and fully capable of holding seasonal rainwater again. The food web was resurrected, as massive herds of smaller grazers multiplied rapidly on the new grass. Apex predators returned from their long exile. Lions, cheetahs, and leopards moved back into the territory to hunt. The ecosystem balanced itself flawlessly. Peer-reviewed ecological monitoring studies published in scientific journals like Pachyderm specifically verify this mega-herbivore impact on woody vegetation. Clinical data confirms it. By simply eating the unwanted brush, the black rhino rebuilt the entire food chain from the dirt up. The Olpejeta management team successfully engineered a biological miracle. The valley was alive again. The ecosystem was saved. But that was not the craziest part. The solution engineered by the wildlife management team worked exactly as designed. Massive rhinos ate the heavy brush. Green grass returned, the food web stabilized, and the rhino population exploded. But that biological success immediately triggered a terrifying new crisis. To protect this valuable breeding population from heavily armed, highly organized poaching syndicates, the Olpejeta Conservancy had to build a wall. Engineers constructed a massive solar-powered perimeter of high-voltage electrified fencing. Stretching for over 120 kilometers, the barrier completely surrounded the sanctuary. The beautiful valley became a militarized, impenetrable fortress. It kept ruthless poachers out and the rhinos safe. But it also trapped them inside. Black rhinos are not social animals. These creatures do not form cooperative herds like elephants or wildebeest. They are solitary and intensely territorial. A mature male black rhino requires a massive personal home range to survive, patrolling that specific territory relentlessly. He marks borders daily with heavy dung, middens, and chemical urine sprays, defending those invisible lines with lethal violence. In a natural, unfenced ecosystem, the vast landscape acts as a natural pressure release valve. When a young male rhino matures, he simply walks away. He travels for days across the African plains until finding an empty stretch of savanna to claim as his own. But inside the high-voltage electric wire of Olpejeta, that natural release valve was permanently welded shut. By the mid-2000s, unbelievable breeding success pushed the local population right to the absolute limit. The Conservancy hit a dangerous biological threshold called the ecological carrying capacity. The valley was full. There was simply no empty land left to claim. Every square mile of the territory was occupied by a massive, aggressive, heavily armed male. When young rhinos grew up and naturally tried to establish territories, they hit the electric wire. Unable to leave, these juveniles turned around and challenged older, established males. The pristine sanctuary rapidly deteriorated into a biological war zone. Violent, territorial clashes between massive rhinos spiked dramatically. These are not gentle warning fights. These are brutal, fatal collisions. Two massive animals charge at over 30 miles per hour, using sharp keratin horns to gore each other to death. The fortress conservation model successfully saved the eastern black rhino from extinction, but it inadvertently turned the sanctuary into a high-voltage prison. The animals bred so successfully that they were literally starting to destroy themselves. The human management team realized they had to step in and forcefully play the role of the missing landscape. Humans had to become the pressure release valve. Today, the teams at Olpejeta are locked in a relentless, dangerous logistical nightmare. To stop rhinos from killing each other over territory, humans must continuously manually remove them. Low-flying helicopters track surplus animals through the thick brush. Wildlife veterinarians hang out of open doors and shoot the targets with concentrated tranquilizer darts. The specific drug used is a powerful synthetic opioid called etorphine. It is roughly 3,000 times more powerful than standard medical morphine, and so lethal that a single accidental drop on a bare human hand can kill the veterinarian in minutes. When the massive rhino finally goes down in the dirt, ground teams rush in. It is absolute chaos. Handlers immediately blindfold the animal, packing its ears with heavy cotton to block the sound of roaring diesel vehicles. Breathing is monitored constantly because the heavy narcotic severely depresses the respiratory system. Heavy-duty electric winches, thick steel cables, and flatbed trucks are required to physically drag the sleeping giant out of the brush. Veterinarians wake the animal up inside a heavily reinforced steel crate using a specific chemical reversal agent. Then, transport crews drive the container hundreds of miles across the country. Sometimes the crate is strapped to a heavy transport aircraft and airlifted. The rhino is dropped into a new empty conservancy. Conservationists have to constantly seed new rhino populations across Kenya simply to keep the original Olpeheta population from imploding. The system is unnatural. It requires massive, ongoing funding, constant helicopter fuel, and dangerous daily human intervention. This creates a deeply unsettling philosophical paradox about the fundamental nature of the wild. We look at a thriving, beautifully balanced savanna and desperately want to believe that nature is finally healing. Society wants to believe that if the exact right pieces are put back on the board will magically play itself. But the reality of the Laikipia basin tells a much darker story. For millions of years, massive mega-herbivores like the black rhino operated as the autonomous architects of the African continent. These giants shaped the trees, built the soil, and created the exact physical conditions required for hundreds of other distinct species to exist. They were the master mechanics of a self-sustaining engine. Today, that autonomous engine is dead. Humanity shattered the vast, interconnected landscapes into tiny, isolated fragments, surrounding those tiny fragments with high-voltage wire. The black rhino was successfully brought back from the brink of annihilation, but the wild was not actually brought back. It was replaced with a curated, militarized, hyper-managed biological garden. The black rhino is no longer the independent architect of the savanna. Its existence is dependent on low-flying helicopters, lethal tranquilizer darts, and heavy flatbed trucks just to survive its own biological success. The natural machinery of the planet is broken so thoroughly that massive gears must now be manually turned by humans. We have to do it every single day, forever. If funding for the helicopters stops, the rhinos will overpopulate and butcher each other against the electric wire. If the electric fences are turned off, heavily armed poaching syndicates will immediately return and slaughter them for their horns. If the rhinos are removed entirely, the suffocating brush will return and choke the vibrant valley back into a silent, sterile desert. There is no going back to an untouched, pristine, natural world. We are permanently trapped holding the steering wheel. Humans are the ultimate apex predators, but we are also the ultimate, highly reluctant zookeepers of a fractured planet. If you thought the intense, unintended consequences of dropping 20 rhinos into a dying Kenyan valley was insane, wait until you see what the next subject did to an entire river system. A team of desperate biologists took a controversial apex predator and threw it directly into a collapsing national park. They hoped it would eat a few sick animals. Instead, it literally changed the physical direction of the rivers. You will never look at nature the same way again.